Well, happy Sunday, everybody. Getting ready to record a Mike in the Midwest for our patrons. So let me mute my phone. And we'll get cracking. What episode is this? 217. 217. I lost my place. Do. Here we go. Why do I hear the TV? Do I have? Because it wasn't muted. Well, hello to everybody, the one person who's tuned in live. I never announced that we're live on Sunday mornings. Here we go. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to episode number 217 of Mike in the Midwest, our mini podcast for the amazing patrons just like you of the Be Our Guest podcast. Of course, my name is Mike Rallman, host of the Be Our Guest podcast. You can find me on the social media at Be Our Guest Mike. That would be on Instagram, Threads, and of course, Twitter/X. Would love to contact you this week. Get in touch. And of course, you can always find me in our exclusive Be Our Guest podcast Clubhouse, which you can find for free. No ads, no nothing except a lot of fun over at beourguestpodcast.com/clubhouse. Come hang with about 1,200 amazing podcast listeners. We talk sports. We talk, of course, Disney. We have Cruise Line. We have Walt Disney World, Disneyland, and international parks. We talk dining. We have a little channel just dining. We have all kinds. We have the living room. You just want to talk life? Come into to the living room channel. We talk about all kinds of stuff. Come over, hang out with us. We have a good time. We even have an entire server just for our patrons. So if you want to get in on that, hey, that's all for you guys that are supporting us on Patreon. We appreciate you so very much. So it is a Sunday morning. It is September 22nd. I know we're missing it by a day. I can't say, do you remember? It was the 21st. I went to a cheerleading competition yesterday. And of course, there's a DJ because every cheer squad has their 2-minute and 45-second mix that they pay a fortune to get made each year that has their school name and all kinds. It's a remix that each school pays to get done each year. And like ours says, it's a professional mix of music, and it will say Francis Howell in there a couple of times. It will say Vikings. It will tell everybody in the song that we Vikings row. We rowed the boat. It's a whole thing, and of course, in between all these cheerleading competitions, performances, there's a DJ that keeps the crowd involved, keeps the crowd stroked up. So, of course, yesterday the competition was on September 21st. So we had to hear Earth, Wind, and Fire all the time, which I am cool with because I think that is one of the greatest songs. I mean, bring the funk the whole time. It was pretty sweet. But I mean, it's sad that the 21st of September hit on a Saturday this year. So we did not get to do much with it here on the podcast. So, opportunity loss. It's so sad, but I hope you got to celebrate the 21st of September wherever you are in the world. By the way, happy fall here in the States, or I guess happy spring to our folks down in the Southern Hemisphere. You have made it through winter. Good job. I know I have a lot of friends down in Australia that have been talking about, oh my gosh, it's been red. Hey, you made it. And we're getting ready to go into it. So no, fall's awesome. So we've made it through the heat. So hopefully you're doing well. We're having a good time here. You know, this is the best time of the year here in where I live. Of course, it is football season. I saw Scotty G, his daughter Emily celebrated homecoming last night. They had their big homecoming dance. Saw her pictures on Facebook. She looked beautiful. I just can't believe she's a senior. It's just shocking when you see that stuff, right? Because Emily and Mallory have grown up together because of the relationship I have with Scott and Elizabeth over the years because of the podcast. And I truly see them not as these young women that they've become so quickly. Just it's amazing that they'll be in college in a couple of years. You know, she's a senior and she looks, she looked amazing in her homecoming dress. And this we're moving into homecoming week here at Francis Howell this week coming up. And it's just one of those things. It goes so quickly. And it's one of those things though. It's a sign of the times, right? That tells you that you're into the fall. If you live in a town in most places in the United States, homecoming week for your high school, your community is kind of a rallying point, right? This year it's a little bit early. When I grew up, it seemed like homecoming always kind of fell for our high school around Halloween ish, like mid to late October. It seems like it's been pushed up a little bit. I mean, of course, this is kind of mid September. Last year, our homecoming was like almost early September. It seemed really strange. But yeah, Mallory, this is of course, the week leading up to homecoming. I guess this is how you guys do it at your high school, Spirit Week, where every day there's a theme. The cheerleaders are, of course, in charge of everything basically during homecoming week. We're of course in the booster club for the cheerleaders. My wife's the vice president. So we currently have 900 cheerleading homecoming rally t-shirts in our house that we're going to be selling this week for the high school football game on Friday night. So yes, we have all sizes and all shapes, and the extras will be shot out of a uh, t-shirt cannon Friday night that we don't sell, but we'll be selling those at the junior high, the high schools, the high school, the junior high feeder schools, all kinds of stuff all week at lunch shifts. So yeah, it's a military operation this week to sell 900 t-shirts at $20 a pop. And that's a fundraiser for the cheerleaders. But HOWELL. You want a shirt? Let me know. I can get you one. This is not a plug. But hey, if you want a cool looking shirt with a Viking and it says embrace the H, let's roll. It's got all of our football players on the back. Anyway, but yeah, homecoming was always one of those times that always marked the fall, and it was always an exciting time. And I was curious as to what your memories of homecoming were growing up in your high school. So I went to high school a little bit. I grew up in St. Louis, just like my wife. It's funny because I've mentioned this on the podcast, right? That where we live now, we live about 20 miles to the west of where my wife and I grew up. We grew up in North St. Louis County. So we grew up in a little community just north of downtown St. Louis. If you look, like, I know everybody kind of pictures St. Louis like the Arch, right? Downtown where the Arch is, and in the baseball stadium where the Cardinals play. Where I grew up was in a suburb of St. Louis, probably about 10 miles, 15 miles north of St. Louis in a town called Florissant. So it was North St. Louis County. That's where I grew up. That's where my dad grew up. That's where my grandparents lived. Everybody lived there. That's where Pam grew up. Pam grew up there too, in another just a adjacent city. I went to Pam and I grew up in the same school district. I went to Hazelwood Central High School. She went to Hazelwood East High School. So we were in the same district, but we went to rival high schools within the district. I was a Hawk, Hazelwood Central Hawk. She was a Hazelwood East Spartan. And shout out to Scotty G. She was a Spartan too. And she was a year older than me. But we didn't know each other in high school. So it was kind of weird. But we met when we started teaching together later. But the thing is, looking back, it's funny to see your traditions of high school homecoming, because when I look back, we had a big parade every year at our high school. And we weren't a small town though. Like, our town was 55,000 people. And when I look back, sometimes I wish I would have gone to I wish I would have grown up in like a small town, because I see these like small towns. Because when I was in college, my dad, he owned a mobile disc jockey company. So we would DJ proms and wedding receptions and all kinds of events, car shows, whatever needed an MC. That's what we did. And that's what I did on Friday and Saturday nights outside of working at the skating rink. I would go out and host events. And a lot of times in the fall, and I got my pick of the events. When my dad would book something, I would look and see what the events were we had, because we had 9 systems. So I'd look and cherry pick the events, like, okay, what do we have this weekend? And I would pick whatever one I wanted. This kind of just, since my dad owned the company, I got to kind of go just cherry pick my events. So sometimes we would do these fall festivals or homecomings or whatever and host things. And every once in a while, there would be a homecoming event where there would be a parade in a small town. And I thought it was so cool how smaller towns, like these little towns in Illinois, right across the river, that the high school was really the heart and soul of the entire town. Where I went to high school, it was neat because we had a great big high school. We had a high school, I can't remember. I want to say my graduating class was about 1,000. So we had a high school of probably about 3,000 people. It was a big high school. And Pam's high school was about the same size. There were 3 high schools in our district: West, Central, and East. And so we had a and we had a lot of high schools in our city. We had Hazel Central, Hazelwood West, Hazelwood East. We had McClure North. We had a whole bunch of high schools. So the thing was, there wasn't like one high school in a small town. But I've gone over to these little towns across the river in Illinois, where you have like one high school or 2 high schools that are rivals, or even down the way in Missouri that's a little bit out in the outskirts. And their homecomings are epic because the whole town revolves around the school events. And that's kind of what we have at Howell. It's a lot better out where we live now because everybody goes to the football games. Friday Night Lights is a big deal where we live. And this is why I'm in heaven where we live now. It's a big deal. So when we go to the football games, we see all of our neighbors. Everybody's at the games. You know, this is what I live for. This is awesome. But we don't have like a parade because we don't have like a major thoroughfare. It's like a safe place to have a parade where in our attendance area. That would be great. Now I'm jealous because Francis Howell Central, the other high school in our district, we have 3 high schools. The other one that's near us does have a homecoming parade because they have this little section of their attendance area that's called Cottleville, and it's like this little old town. It's almost got a little main street and stuff, and they have the homecoming parade right through this little main street area, and it's awesome. Everybody in that little main street area has golf carts and stuff where they get around because there's little wineries, there's little ice cream shops. We go over there all the time. It's like a 5-minute drive. We take our Jeep over there. It's right across it's right across the dual highway from us. That's why it's kind of we can't, we can't have a parade because you'd have to go across a double state highway. But in their attendance area, it's perfect because all the kids live over there. So they just shut it down. They do the parade over there, and it's awesome. We're like, our attendance area is on a dual highway. We can't shut down a state highway to have a parade. It won't work. But I mean, I guess there's give and take for what we have. Our school's way out in the middle of nowhere in the sticks part of our district, which is fine. But when I look back at my high school, like we did have a parade. Like we had it through like subdivisions in our area. And one of the memories I have of our homecoming, long story short, long story long, is that I remember that in high school, I drove a 1971 MGB convertible. Now, if you don't know what an MGB is, it's like a Mazda Miata. It's a teeny tiny little sports car. It was a coupe. It only had 2 seats. And my grandpa bought this car when I was 12 for $500 out in the country, which out in the country was right where the Dairy Queen sits, where we go every Friday and Saturday night to get our ice creams now. Because where we live now, when I was in elementary school, this was rural out here in St. Charles. There was nothing out here. But as sprawl happened over the past 30 or 40 years, everybody moved out this way. This is the booming area now. But back then, there was nobody out here. But this construction worker my grandpa worked with, named Irv, he lived on this rural property out here, right by where they built the Dairy Queen eventually on the same road. It was called Independence. And my grandpa came out here. Irv said he had this old broken down MG that he got somehow. He wanted to sell it. My grandpa bought it, didn't run. We put it on a trailer. I remember like it was all messed up. My grandpa hauled it home on a trailer. We put it in my grandpa's detached garage and we worked on it for years. Got it running. That's what I ran. That's what I drove in high school. And, again, I'm a 6'3" dude and I was driving this little bitty, it looked like a go-kart, but it had great leg room actually. But I mean, the thing was you can't haul people around in it because it's an MG. It only has 2 seats. So I'm in it and my girlfriend or whoever at the time, my buddy would be in it. That's it. It had a luggage rack on the back though. I did have every once in a while I'd take people on the luggage rack when, if I only had to go around the subdivision or something. It's a wonder I didn't get thrown in jail. But the cool thing is that it was bright orange. And our homecoming a lot of times happened around Halloween. And so one year our homecoming happened on Halloween. And my girlfriend was a Hawkette at the time. So the Hawkettes were the dancers. In our high school, they're called the Golden Girls at Francis Howell. But they're not the cheerleaders, but the dancers. And she was a queen candidate or whatever they're called. And she was running for homecoming queen. And so she was in the parade because all the queen candidates had to be in the parade. So we made my MGB look like a pumpkin because it was perfect. It was an orange MGB. And if you've ever seen an orange MGB, the headlights almost look like eyes. You Google 71 MGB, they're cute little cars. It's like an Austin Powers car. It almost looks like a little Porsche Roadster, but they weren't expensive. I'm telling you, we bought it for $500 and fixed it up. But we got it looking all cool. And she rode, like, we made a little seat on the luggage rack and sat back there, and it was a stick. And the thing was, like, it was but the thing, they're not meant to go slow because it will overheat because, like, it's just not meant to, like, idle for, like, miles and miles for, like, an hour. So I had to I was worried the thing was going to overheat the whole time. And because you got to give it some air. And when you're idling, it's not getting air. I just remember sweating it the whole time, like telling Jennifer, like, oh my gosh, this thing's going to overheat. And she's like, don't let this thing burn up while I'm back here. It'll be embarrassing and I'll lose. And it was a big mess. But that was one of my homecoming memories. And of course, we always had the homecoming soccer game was in the morning. So you would go to the high school in the morning. I think the soccer team played at like 11 a.m. So you go watch the soccer team. I think the parade was early. The parade was first. Like the parade would happen at like 9 a.m. You parade your cars and the band and everything would go through the subdivisions. Then you would go to the soccer game. I think it was like at 11. Then the football game. We didn't have Friday night lights typically. I don't think we even had lights at Hazelwood Central now that I think about it. And the football game would kick off like at 1 or 2 in the afternoon. And we'd play a rival. And that was kind of it. And then you had your dance at like 7. So it was always a full day for our homecoming. So it'd be like parade, soccer game, and then kind of go clean up. And then go football game and then go home, clean up. And then a lot of times we went to dinner before the dance. That's kind of how our homecoming fell. Now, I don't know how your homecoming fell, but I'd love to hear your traditions that you had in high school and your memories. Like, was it a huge deal where you're from? I know like down in the South, it is a big, big deal, maybe Texas or wherever, but I wonder what it's like up in Wisconsin or, like in the Northeast or wherever it is out West. What do you remember from your high school? Did you go always with dates? I know a lot of times nowadays, a lot of the kids go with just like a group of friends, but what are your memories from homecoming? I'd love to hear that for next week. So patreon.com/be our guest podcast. Give me some thoughts there. All right. So it is homecoming week and that is where we are. And by the way, Mizzou snuck one out yesterday. So I'm happy with that. All right. Last week, we just kind of briefly talked on, have we lost our sense of wonder? We had 19 people in space at the same time. Some of those people were as far out away from our planet as we'd been in 50 years. And I had not heard anything on the news about it. Hardly at all. It was crazy. We had a citizen doing a spacewalk. I mean, wild. And Trisha said, she still wonders about things. We talked about it on the Patreon server on Discord, and I'm glad. But I just hope we never lose our sense of wonder. And it's just good to think about things. And I think that's why a lot of times it's good sometimes to just take a walk without listening to a podcast. I know, right? without listening to anything, without listening to music or listening just to ambient music or something like that, that lets our brain rest, lets our brain think. Do you do that very often where you just take time to just wonder, just think, just let your mind daydream? And you know what? As a teacher, that's the thing. It is really a thing, right? Think about that. How many times have teachers yelled at kids for staring out the window because your instruction is so important, right? I spent 17 years as an instructor, and there were tons of times where I probably got on a kid because he was, quote, off task and he was thinking about something else. And it probably rightly so many times, because if they have to learn a skill or they have to learn what I'm teaching them at that time, they do have to be on point that day. They have to focus on the lesson. But there is definitely a time, and there should be a time multiple times a day where it is appropriate to stare out a window and just think about it. Like, think about, the leaves right now. It's the fall. Today's the first day of fall, and I'm looking out we have a rainy, that's going to get to today's topic. It's a rainy Sunday morning. The heat is finally broken a little bit today here in St. Louis. And photosynthesis. And, we never think about photosynthesis, but those leaves are starting to change on my neighbor's tree. Like, photosynthesis, man, that's amazing how that happens, right? Do we ever think about that? That the plants make their own food because of light and water and that whole process? And like, do we ever stop to wonder about that? That's amazing. So we do need to wonder, and you do need to think, let kids just think. Don't let them veg out, but man, just let them just daydream. Let them think. Anyway, that's my thing. Trisha says, not on that topic, but she had feedback from last week, which I always love. Says, just like you, Mike, we occasionally went to McDonald's, and I remember the original buckets. I also remember the McChicken nuggets that you could dress in Halloween costumes. I always opted for a pillowcase for trick-or-treating because those buckets always held next to no candy, and the handle would break under any weight. Also, I still get a sense of wonder every time I see Cinderella Castle. I can't help but break out into a grin. Don't we all, as Disney fans? We see that, it's like, "God, that sucker is so big." And I thought I would be underwhelmed when I went to Disneyland in 22 and saw Sleeping Beauty Castle, but I wasn't. I was like, because I was really worried about that. I'll be honest with you guys. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna hate Disneyland because how small the castle is. 'Cause I've gone to World for so much. But what I appreciated was that's Walt's castle. I was like, that is the OG. I was not sad about it. I was just like, this is classic. This is vintage. This has been here so long. I love this little castle. I really was. I thought I was gonna be so sad about how small it was. But I think it's because I knew it was gonna be small. If I would have not known, that might have been a problem. But I knew to temper my expectations, and I was just excited that, God, that's the one. Like, this is Disneyland. This is Sleeping Beauty Castle. I was just like, and I get to go through it. Eh, I still think, and I know I'm getting old because I like these kind of things, but walking through Sleeping Beauty Castle and seeing little dioramas and the story that it tells, other than how hot it is one of the coolest experiences. I love that because it's storytelling at your own pace, and it's the simplicity of the experience, but it's Disney storytelling, and it's discoverable, right? There's not a cast member there like waving you into the castle. You just got to kind of find that little entrance, and you got to weave your way up a dark staircase, and you got to go from one window to the next. It's self-guided. I love it. I can't wait to do that again in January. That's my kind of jam. Anyway, I just love that kind of stuff. I hope you guys enjoy these shows. I know it's just total rambling. I'm sorry for that, but this is kind of what Mike in the Midwest is. All right, let's get to today's topic. Today's topic is drawn again by what's happening in my world this morning. This morning, we finally got some beneficial rain here in Missouri, here in St. Charles, where We have not had rain in a good couple of weeks, man. It has been super dry. I mean, just our grass is toast. It is so dry, and we have needed it terribly. And we got a soaker this morning. I woke up about 3 o'clock in the morning, thunder, lightning, boom, woke me out of bed. And it was like, finally, we getting a good thunderstorm. I love a good thunderstorm. I'm a huge weather nut. I was like, good, we're getting a soaker. Bummer was I had to do my 8-mile walk this morning, my sunrise 8 on a Sunday morning on the treadmill. That's okay though, because we needed the rain. But what it made me think of was, and I don't know why, but it's weird how things trigger other memories, was mornings that I spent with my grandma. Now, this is not my grandma that I talk about all the time, my grandma Ruth, because my grandma Ruth and my grandpa Charlie, which I'm always talking about, those are my dad's parents. I spent a majority of my time at their house. They're the ones like my grandpa that I did the MG with. That's who I'm talking about. I'm talking about my grandma Eileen right now. This is my mom's mom. So they lived actually closer to us. They lived around the block from us, just one street over, in exactly the same kind of house we grew up in from the time I was born until 6th grade. So they lived just one street over, exact same kind of house. Wasn't really a subdivision, but just the next street over. And I wasn't as close to them as I was my dad's parents. I basically grew up at my dad's parents' house, but I would go over there a lot too because they were my grandparents and they were just right around the block. So I'd ride my bike over there all the time. And I just remember, some mornings I would go over just to see Grandma Eileen and, hang out with her because she didn't work and she was there. My grandpa Mace, he went off to work and it's so funny because like I don't know why. I am 50 years old and this memory came to me on a rainy Sunday morning that I remember because it was probably just a summer weekday morning. I was probably 8, 9, 10 years old. I was riding a bicycle and I just got on my bicycle and I remember riding over to grandma's house and just knocking on her door and she'd let me in. And, it's just kind of a thing. Like it was never planned. She was always there. She didn't have a job and she was a coffee drinker and she had these plastic coffee mugs. And I just remember when you went into her kitchen, her house was very, very small. It was the exact same as my house. Cause again, we had a very small starter house and so was theirs. And you would go into their kitchen with this linoleum floor. I just remember like it had this feel to it. But you would go in there and she would always have it was a Mr. Coffee machine. You remember those from like the 70s? It was a Mr. Coffee machine. And she was always making her coffee. And she had this plastic coffee cup, this yellow plastic coffee cup that she always used. And on the inside, it was brown because I guess she used the same one all the time, but it was burnt, like it had a coffee stain in it. And she always used it. And why I'm remembering these things, I was wondering about this morning as I was recalling this memory, but she always used the same one. And she put her like creamer in there all the time, stirred it in. And it always looked so good to me as a kid. But I've never been a coffee drinker. I do not drink coffee and I never have. But it always like smelled kind of good. I like the smell of coffee, but it like she'd always drink it. And I remember that, I would go over there and just hang out with grandma and she would get her cup of coffee and we'd sit at her kitchen table there in her small little kitchen. And she would always have her little AM radio in the corner of the kitchen going, and it was on Camel X, which was our AM talk radio station, which told you the news or if it was later in the day, they'd have a call-in radio show where you could call in and give your opinion on, the topic of the day or whatever. But she would always have some kind of cookies, but the thing was my other grandma always made cookies. I've told you about my grandma's cookies and how I have the tin that she always made the cookies in. This grandma, she wasn't much of a cooker. My mom doesn't cook either. My mom never cooked really, but in her mom apparently didn't either. Grandma Eileen didn't cook, but she always went to the store and bought, and I don't even know what the brand was, but she always had these cookies that, and maybe you guys had these, but this memory just popped into my head right now. They were cookies that were in the shape of windmills. They were like windmill cookies, and I can't they had kind of like a cinnamon taste to them, but she always had those cookies. She always had Little Debbie cakes. And so, she'd offer one of those, and we'd sit at the table, and I'd have milk. I wouldn't have, obviously, coffee. She'd have her coffee, and she would smoke sometimes, maybe sometimes not. My grandpa smoked a pipe, so that their house kind of smelled like smoke sometimes. But we just sit there and talk, because I think she was glad to have company because she didn't work. And a lot of times my sister would come over too. I have a younger sister. And when she would watch us for the whole day, she'd drive us over to see her parents in Alton, Illinois, across the river, because they were my great grandparents. We'd spend the day over there. But a lot of times I would just impromptu, because I was bored, and just go over there and just hang out and see grandma, have a couple cookies, glass of milk, and just talk. And, like, when you think about that, those days as a kid were just fleeting, right? You don't think about that was a special day, because it was probably a Tuesday in March, maybe a Thursday in July, and it was not a special day at all, right? It wasn't a special day. But when you look back at it from this point of view, as you get to your midpoint of your life, hopefully your midpoint of your life, you think back and you say, wow, it was cool that she took that time to sit down with me. And I don't know if it was 5 minutes. I don't know if it was 15 minutes, or if we sat there for an hour and talked about things. I don't even know what we talked about. I know sometimes she would get out. My grandma really liked to she always had playing cards at her house. And a lot of times she liked to play rummy, not complicated rummy. It was basically just where you had to get like three of a kind, or like Old Maid or Goldfish or Go Fish, not Goldfish, Go Fish. She'd always have playing cards. So she'd always play simple like playing cards games with me. But the fact was, it seemed like it was always early in the morning. Not early in the morning, but like before lunchtime. So I could go over and see grandma, get a little snack, get a little milk and cookies early in the day before lunch, and still have enough time to, get back on my bicycle, go meet my friends, and still play kickball and everything before lunch and the day get going. But as I look back on that, I'm glad I have that memory in my heart. And it's not a huge thing at all. But, because most of my memories do revolve around my other sets of grandparents. My grandma Ruth and my grandpa Charlie over there. Both of my grandpa's names were Charlie, so it's kind of confusing. I call that my grandpa that was married to my mom's mom, Mace, to kind of keep it straight, because his last name was Mason. But when you look back on these things as you get older, those were the good times. Think about that. Like when you were 7 or 8 or 9 and you're sitting there having a windmill cookie, maybe playing Go Fish with your grandma on a Tuesday morning at 9:30 in the summer, you don't have a care in the world. You have not a care in the world. And you don't even know it at the time. That's the whole thing, is you don't know it at the time. And I think that's the goal as parents. And now, again, I don't have any little kids anymore, but if I had advice to give parents at this time, it's to let your kids have that for as long as possible. Let your kids achieve the fact that they don't have a care in the world for as long as possible, because as soon as they get into middle, upper elementary school, middle school, high school, they'll have a lot of cares. They start to get a lot of stress about academics and social issues and, peer pressure and stuff like that. Then there's a lot of stress. But I think there is that sweet spot for a while where you really don't have a care in the world other than hanging out with grandma. What are you going to do with your friend? Are you going to play kickball? Are you going to play Foursquare? Are you going to ride your bike today? Because I think I was in that zone at that point. And I look back, and that memory is just so happy to me. So I got a little homework for you for next week. Give me a quick story. Did you ever have that crazy morning, that just easy, chill morning with grandma or grandpa at the kitchen table, where you shared a milk and a windmill cookie while grandpa had a cup of coffee? Also, what were your homecoming traditions? I'd like to hear those as well. Hope we got to share a few minutes today, and hopefully you had a good memory come up into your mind, because that's what this is all about. But thanks again for your support of the show. Hope you're enjoying the big shows. We'll have the live call-in show tonight. We had a big one last weekend. We're going to have another one great tonight. 7 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Central. Give Scott and I a call. But I'll be getting it set up for you here in just a few hours. So until we talk again, you guys have a great Sunday. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you real soon.